We've forgotten the weight of a single letter. We spend our lives gliding over glass, our fingers dancing in a world where friction doesn't exist anymore, and everything is immediate. We type, we delete, we edit before we even finish the thought, and the screen just accepts it all without leaving a single mark or trace. There's something a bit ghostly about it, isn't it? The way our ideas appear and disappear without ever having to exist in the physical world. I decided to change that last week, to step back into the world of paper and ink and see if I still knew how to be still. 10 pages a day, and copied, perfectly formed characters. It sounded like a simple, quiet kind of meditation for a noisy, digital soul. I thought I'd be like a monk in a mountain temple, finding enlightenment in the curves of every single vowel I traced with my pen. In reality, I felt more like a schoolchild being punished for a crime I couldn't quite remember committing in some distant, forgotten past life. It turns out that the physical act of writing is actually quite a violent demand on a body that has become used to clicking. The first page was almost pleasant, a nostalgic trip back to the smell of fresh paper and the steady, blue flow of liquid ink. I noticed the way the light hits the texture of the page, a landscape of tiny hills and valleys that the pen has to navigate. It felt deliberate, slow. Every stroke was a choice that couldn't be undone by a quick tap of a button or a swipe of a thumb. I was confident at first. I thought, this is it. This is the cure for the digital rush that's been making me so restless lately. But by page 3, the romanticism started to fade into a dull, throbbing reality in my wrist and my knuckles and my very bones. The pen started to feel heavy, like I was trying to drag a boulder across a field of sand with just the tips of my fingers. I noticed that my handwriting isn't nearly as beautiful as I remembered it being 10 or 15 years ago, when I used it every day. It's shaky, it's inconsistent. It reveals things about my state of mind that I'd rather keep hidden, even from myself in the quiet. You can't hide a distracted mind on paper. The ink knows exactly when your thoughts have wandered off to something else, somewhere far away. The letters get longer. The lines start to tilt, and the whole thing begins to look like a slow-motion collapse of my own focus. I began to wonder why I was doing this to myself. Why 10 pages? Why not just one? Or a single, thoughtful paragraph for the day? Is there something sacred about the quantity? Or am I just obsessed with the idea of suffering for the sake of my own growth? We love to measure our progress in pain, as if the ache in our joints is a receipt for the wisdom we think we're buying. My thumb was starting to turn a strange shade of purple, and my middle finger had developed a permanent, angry, and very red dent. I've heard people talk about hand lock, that moment where your muscles simply decide they've had enough of your nonsense and your strange rules. It happened to me on page 6. My hand just stopped. It became a claw, frozen in a grip on a piece of cheap plastic. I sat there for a long minute, looking at my fingers as if they belonged to a total stranger, or a machine that had broken. It's a very strange kind of vulnerability, to be betrayed by your own anatomy over something as simple and as small as a pen. I had to pry my fingers open, one by one, like I was opening a rusted gate that hadn't been touched in many long decades. I noticed you're probably leaning back a bit now, maybe checking the tension in your own shoulders or the way you're holding your phone. We carry so much tension we don't even know is there until we try to stay perfectly still and do one thing for an hour. Why is it so hard to just sit and move a pen? Why does it feel like I'm fighting a war against the very air? I think it is because we aren't used to the consequences of our own movements anymore in this frictionless, digital world of ours where nothing lasts. On a screen, a mistake is invisible. On paper, A mistake is a permanent scar, a smudge that tells everyone exactly where you failed. I had to learn to live with the smudges, to accept that my hand wasn't perfect and the ink wasn't always going to cooperate. There is a dry irony in seeking peace through a process that causes so much physical discomfort and genuine, mounting frustration in the dark. I was supposedly meditating, but I was mostly just swearing under my breath at the way the liturgy looks on page 8. The contradiction started to settle in the quieter my mind became. The louder the pain in my cramped hand seemed to scream at me. I couldn't tell if I was becoming more patient or if I was just becoming more used to being miserable in a quiet room. Maybe they're the same thing. Maybe numbing is just a more honest word for what we call inner peace these days in our books. I found myself looking at the clock every 2 minutes, counting down the lines until I was finally allowed to be done with it. Is it really a spiritual practice if you rage just counting the seconds until you can go back to being distracted and fast again? I noticed the sound of the pen on the paper, a tiny, rhythmic scratching, like a small animal trying to dig its way out. It's a lonely sound, but it's also a very grounding one. It's the sound of someone actually being present in the world for once. Page 9 was where the words started to lose their meaning and just became shapes, abstract geometry made of wet, black, permanent ink. I wasn't writing language anymore. I was just tracing the path of my own stubbornness across a white, empty, and very indifferent field. My mind went blank, not in a Zen way, but in I don't know who I am anymore kind of way that felt cold. It was almost a relief to lose the meaning. The meaning is where the worry lives, after all, and the shapes are just shapes. I saw a bird land on the windowsill, and I spent 5 minutes just watching it without feeling the need to take a photo. I think that was the first time in years that I saw something and didn't immediately try to turn it into digital data. The bird didn't care about my 10 pages or my locked fingers or my slow, painful quest for a quiet and still mind. A pen is a very sharp tool for someone who doesn't know what they want to say. I finally reached the end of page 10, and my hand felt like it had been through a slow-motion rock crusher for 3 hours. I dropped the pen and it rolled across the floor, making a hollow sound that seemed to echo for much longer than it should. I looked at the stack of paper, 10 pages of blue ink. A physical record of 3 hours of my life that can never be undone. It's a lot of ink. It is a lot of effort for something that no one is ever going to read or even see. I felt a strange kind of grief looking at it. All that work, all that pain, and it's just paper in a drawer now. But then I looked at my hand. It was still a bit shaky, and the dent was still there, but it felt real. I could feel the air moving between my fingers in a way that I don't think I've noticed since I was a child. I went back to my laptop later that night to send an email, and the keys felt like they were made of soft clouds. Typing felt like cheating. It felt like I was bypassing the truth of the effort required to actually communicate anything of real value. I wonder if we've lost our souls in the speed of the delete key and the convenience of the autocorrect that fixes our lives. I'm not sure I'll do 10 pages again tomorrow. Maybe 5. Or maybe I'll just sit and hold the pen and do nothing. The silence is still there, waiting for me, but I am not sure I am ready to face it again quite so soon after today. If you have a pen nearby, you might want to see how it feels to just draw a single, perfect line on paper. Don't worry about the lock. It is just the body's way of reminding you that you are still attached to the world and its weight. Thank you for listening. I'll see you in the next episode.